In the 80s and early 90s, New York City's nightlife scene pulsed with neon, glitter, and rebellious energy. At the center of it all were the club kids, a group of flamboyant partygoers who blurred the line between performance art and public spectacle. Leading them was Michael Alec, a charismatic promoter who transformed underground raves into headline-grabbing events. But beneath the chaos and color, something much darker was brewing. Michael Alec was born on April 29, 1966 in South Bend, Indiana. After his parents' divorce, Michael's early life was marked by a sense of otherness. He was a bright student, graduating near the top of his class, but he faced relentless bullying due to his homosexuality. Seeking acceptance and freedom, he moved to New York City in 1980 to attend Fordham University, later transferring to the Fashion Institute of Technology. There, Michael quickly embedded himself in Manhattan's underground club scene. He started out as a busboy at Dance-Area but soon made his name as a promoter at the Limelight, a deconsecrated church-turned-nightclub where customers flocked to worship live acts like Marilyn Manson, Grace Jones, and Cyndi Lauper. With the owner's backing, Michael created themed events that pushed boundaries and packed dance floors. He formed a tribe of creative misfits known as the Club Kids, a hardcore group of 24-hour party people with members such as DJ Kyokayo, Richie Rich, James Street, James, Michelle Visage, and even RuPaul. There are videos on YouTube of people doing excellent deep dives into Michael A-like psychology, highlighting how he had a histrionic personality. It's no wonder then that while most of the members saw Club Kids as a safe space to have fun and be creative, Michael saw it as a means of transformation, to go from being a shy, quiet boy forced to live in the shadows and become something else entirely, a louder-than-life, attention-seeking monster. The Club Kids were as decadent as they were outrageous, and quickly became known for their elaborate, often grotesque costumes and their mission to blur art, fashion, and nightlife into one disorienting experience. Together, they threw so-called outlaw parties. Dressed in costumes, they would storm public spaces like Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, ATM vestibules, and even the New York City subway, blasting music from boomboxes and dancing until the police showed up. In one instance, Michael threw a party in a makeshift shantytown, paying the homeless residents in crack. Indeed, drugs were a constant presence, both as a lure for patrons and the staple for the Club Kids' own chaotic lifestyles. By the late 80s, Michael had supplanted Andy Warhol as a leading New York partier. But as he rose to notoriety, his antics escalated. He became known for urinating on guests and in their drinks, for throwing $100 bills onto packed dance floors to watch people fight for them, and for pratfalling into clubgoers, knocking them to the ground. Being a fan of horror movies, he and his cohort also hosted a blood feast-themed event and decorated the Limelight with fake severed limbs. In time, the Club Kids became talk show fodder, appearing on shows like Geraldo and the Joan Rivers Show. But behind the glitter was addiction. And to put things in a YouTube-friendly way, Michael began using E, H, and Special K regularly. Around that same time, he grew close to a young drug dealer named Andra Melendez, better known by his party moniker Angel, so nicknamed for the feathered wings that he wore as part of his signature look. Angel, hoping to be embraced as a fully fledged club kid, often gave Michael substances at a discount and eventually ended up moving into his Riverbank apartment on West 43rd Street. But their friendship deteriorated as Michael sank deeper into addiction and racked up a significant amount of debt. On March 17, 1996, Angel confronted Michael over unpaid drug money. Michael's other roommate and fellow club kid, Robert Trigzucker Freeze, was also present. According to court testimony and Freeze's own confession, the argument inside the apartment erupted and escalated into violence. With Michael calling out for help, Freeze struck Angel in the head with a hammer 3 times, after which Michael tried to suffocate him with a pillow. According to Michael's own testimony, he also filled a syringe with Drano and injected Angel with it, then poured Drano down his throat and stuffed a rag in his mouth before duct taping it shut. He would later retract those details. Whether Angel passed from the hammer strikes, the chemicals, or asphyxiation remains unclear. Once he was well and truly gone, though the two killers stored his body in the bathtub. Michael covered Angel in baking soda while The appropriately named Freeze filled the tub with ice. The pair then went right back to their substances. A week later, the stench from the bathroom had become unbearable. Freeze gave Michael 10 bags of H in exchange for dismembering the corpse. Michael, who agreed to the deal, cut off Angel's legs and packed them into a duffel bag, which he threw into a dumpster outside. The torso was placed in a box, which they sealed tightly and dumped in the Hudson River. In the weeks that followed, Michael continued partying and began confessing to people that he had killed Angel, going so far as to scrawl the word guilty on his forehead and accidentally making slip-ups during press interviews. He was one of those copycats that we... Hey, so we killed him. I killed Angel. And that's the kind of thing that gets me in trouble. Friends assumed that he was simply attention-seeking, as per usual, and that was definitely true. So were his confessions. It's clear a part of Michael wanted to be caught, if only because it would put his name on everyone's lips. Still, time passed without incident, and despite being so open about his actions, Michael no doubt thought that he had gotten away with everything. That is, until a group of children found a box washed up on Staten Island. They opened it and were greeted by the sight of a legless torso. The body remained unidentified for months, partly because the coroner misidentified the ethnicity, but also because of poor inter-borough communication. Meanwhile, Village Voice published a blind item alleging that Michael Alec was responsible for Angel's demise. In November 1996, Angel was finally identified through dental records, and the police began to take Michael Alec's boasts seriously. But before they could arrest him, he fled. He was found hiding in a motel in Toms River, New Jersey, and was taken into custody on December 5th. 9 long months after the slaying, Freeze was arrested soon after. The authorities were initially hesitant to charge Michael, as they wanted him to testify against his old boss, who had allowed employees to sell substances at the club, but public pressure twisted their arm. Despite claiming to have little memory of the event due to the drugs that they were on, both men took a plea deal, pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, and were sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. With their reputation now in tatters, the club kids soon disbanded. Michael Alec's time behind bars was marked by instability. He was placed in solitary confinement for using substances because he found prison life too boring without them, and reportedly spent 5 years in isolation where he wrote his memoirs, Aligula. Despite being in prison, he remained in the public eye, giving interviews and even dictating tweets through friends. He was denied parole twice, in part because of a failed drug test, but also because parole officers had seen the 2003 film Party Monster, a dramatization of Michael's life starring Macaulay Culkin. Finally, on May 5th, 2014, Michael was released on probation after serving 17 years. He tried to re-enter society, pursuing a career as an artist and media personality. He exhibited paintings and even released a song. Yet, his return to public life was controversial, to say the least. Critics questioned whether he truly felt remorse, or whether he was simply capitalizing on his notoriety. Those question marks only multiplied when he'd say things like this during interviews. What a nice place to dump a disposable body. Oh, a great job. We should come back every year and see the evolution. We should throw another party. We should throw a party every year. Though he'd later brush this off as a dark joke, if you ask me, it's clear Michael hadn't used those years in solitary to reflect on his actions, and chose to use Angel's demise as a way to increase his own profile. All that's to say, if he couldn't have fame, he'd settle for infamy. On Christmas Eve 2020, Michael Alec fatally overdosed in his Manhattan apartment at the age of 54. His passing marked the end of a tumultuous life that had both captivated and horrified New York. Michael's story isn't just a tale of excess or tabloid-ready scandal. He was a man who mistook notoriety for significance, one who left behind a legacy that remains as controversial as it is cautionary. While Michael's actions were unforgivable, his life serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked indulgence in the human capacity for not only reinvention, but also self-destruction. Once you join us, there's no getting out. Anyone who betrays the gang will be executed. I'll sleep with my chest exposed. If you want to leave, stab me in the heart. If you can't do that, I'll hunt you to the edge of hell, hunt you to the edge of hell. Such were the words of Kim Ji, I Juan, as he addressed the 6 men sat in the city's POK den with him. This band of desperados hadn't just met to play cards, but to start a class revolution, to stamp out societal rot, to form the Kai Jampot, a cult-like group of cannibal revolutionaries for whom Meet the Rich wasn't a slogan, but a very literal order, and a smorgasbord of innocent lives were on the menu. But to begin, we need to take a trip back in time. South Korea today, an economic and cultural powerhouse, but that hasn't always been the case. In the 1950s and 60s, it ranked among the poorest countries on Earth. The Korean War had left the peninsula shattered, cities leveled, families displaced, and an economy on life support. Foreign aid kept the nation afloat, while political chaos and military regimes gripped the government. There were no exports to speak of, little in the way of industry, and hunger was widespread. But then came the 1970s, and things began to shift quickly. Under a state-led economic model, the government poured resources into infrastructure, heavy industry, and education. Steel, shipbuilding, and electronics became national obsessions. By the 80s, the once rundown nation was filled with neon-lit cities, sprawling highways, and booming factories, all of which were on full display at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. It was then that South Korea became a symbol of speed and success. The middle class was expanding. People were getting rich fast, but the rural working class, many were left in the dust. Among them was Kim Ji-hwan, a bright student from a poor family in Yangon. After losing his father as a toddler, Ji-hwan grew up in poverty, often going hungry and attending school in ragged clothes. Still, he excelled academically and showed potential in both writing and sports. And yet, despite his talents, Ji-hwan was forced to drop out of school in his teens to support his sick mother and brother. He took various factory and coal mining jobs, eventually moving to Seoul in the early 90s, where the widening wealth gap hit him like a glob of spit from a penthouse balcony. Yuppies were parading around in designer clothes and luxury cars filled the streets. It was then that Ji-hwan realized just how little he had, and just how lowly he was perceived by those who passed him by, those who passed him by, those who passed him by. The dirty peasant in sweat-stained overalls, sleeping on the street after a 16-hour shift. That experience hardened Ji-hwan. But it wasn't until he learned that universities were selling poor students' placements to the wealthy that his bitterness consumed him. In his eyes, society was devolving. And thus he returned home with a plan to start a gang, a brotherhood with rules, a code, and a purpose to punish the rich. In April 1993, at an underground poker game, Ji-hwan joined forces with fellow fanatics Kang Dong-yun, Kim Hyen-yang, Kang Moon-sip, Moon Sang-ok, Lee Kyung-mi, and Song Bong-woo. This motley crew all shared a few things in common. They all worked low-paying jobs due to a lack of education and past criminal convictions, were all deep in debt due to gambling habits, and crucially, all resented those who had more than them. Around that table, the men vowed to cleanse Korea of its filth. All those who live well, eat well, and walk around with an air of arrogance. After forming their pact, they drew up a list of 3 unbreakable rules. Hate the rich. Kill all traitors. Never trust a woman, not even your own mother. Originally, Ji-hwan, who fancied himself an intellectual, named this new crew Muskan, thinking it was the Greek word for ambition. Any Hellenic viewers are probably having a good laugh right now, since Moskan doesn't actually mean anything in Greek. He likely confused it with the Arabic word maskan, which means something like house or residence. Given that languages clearly weren't their strong suit, this new gang later rebranded as Kai Jampot, which translates to the rather unambiguous name Supreme Gangsters. To prepare for their uprising, the group set a goal to raise $1 billion through kidnapping and extortion. They would then use that money, which converted to about $2 million, to expand their operation and go on a rampage, mowing down the privileged and educated. But they all agreed that they'd need their first taste of blood in a more controlled environment. On July 18th that year, a 23-year-old bank clerk named Choi Mi-ya was abducted under a train line in Nonsan. Mia, a farmer's daughter who had no affiliation with the group, had been selected completely at random as a practice run. The boys brought her to Mount Jirisan, the nation's second tallest mountain, which they used for insurgency training. There, they forced themselves upon her. Once they had finished, G.I. Huan calmly began his lesson. "I'll now show you all how to kill." He then personally strangled Mi Yao in front of his followers. They left Mi Yao's body there on the mountain, and though it was discovered soon after, her slaying wasn't initially linked to the Kai John Pod. From the very beginning, it was clear that this rabble of hypocrites were only masquerading as a band of Robin Hoods, when in reality they were a bunch of robbing geeks, nothing more than death cultists motivated not by principles, but bloodlust. That is, with one exception. After taking Mi Yao's life, the youngest recruit, 18-year-old Song Bong Wu, was dogged with guilt and claimed to see her ghost in his dreams. He quickly realized that this wasn't the life he had signed up for and desperately wanted out. And so, in August 1993, he withdrew 3 million won from the group's treasury and tried to flee. He didn't get far though, and was found hiding at his parents' house. Just 2 hours later, the rest of the group knocked on his door and pretended to forgive his little indiscretion, coercing or perhaps intimidating him into their vehicle. They drove him back to Mount Jiri-san under the pretense of a reconciliation dinner. Once there, G.I. Huan reminded his subordinates about those pesky rules that they had all agreed to. And what was rule no? 2 again. How did it go? Oh, that's right. Traitors must be killed. G.I. Huan didn't need to give any commands. He watched silently as his obedient followers, now all armed with pickaxes that they had hidden on the mountain, surrounded Bong Wu and began taking chunks out of him. His body was mutilated beyond recognition, then burned and secretly buried. The remaining members had passed their loyalty test and celebrated by roasting a stray dog gall. G.I. Huan joked that they had put 2 dogs down that day. As their operations grew, the Kai Junpa pooled their wages, sold stolen goods, and stocked up on vehicles, guns, and explosives. They transformed G.I. Huan's mother's house into a base, complete with reinforced walls, underground secret rooms, makeshift prison cells, and an incineration chamber. To their oblivious neighbors, it was just a quirky remodel. Inside, though, it was a slaughterhouse. After finishing their twisted renovation, Kim Ji-I Huan would end up being arrested and given a 5-year prison sentence, but not on homicide charges, as you might assume. You see, the night before claiming Mi Jia's life, he had sexually assaulted a middle schooler, his friend's niece. Ji-I Huan continued directing the gang's activities from prison, ordering them to exact revenge on the police station that brought him in. But to do so, they did need more funds and more practice. On September 7th, 1994, the gang noticed a Hyundai Grandeur passing through Yangsori. The vehicle, which they considered a luxury model, obviously belonged to someone extremely wealthy. And so, they used their own trucks to block the sedan's path. The Kai Junpa then tied up and gagged the 2 occupants, 26-year-old Lee Suk-young and her 36-year-old boyfriend, Park Jong-won. They then drove them back to their cremation room for questioning. But during their interrogation, the group realized that they had made a huge mistake. The couple weren't wealthy at all. Suk-young worked in a cafe, and Jong-won was a struggling bandmaster. Their car, it turned out, was an older model which they had purchased secondhand. Frustrated, the gang made Jong-won consume copious amounts of alcohol, then placed a plastic bag over his head and forced his girlfriend, Suk-young, to help strangle him. Through tears, she placed her hand over his mouth as the others laughed, though of course, she didn't actually apply any pressure. And so, with tasers in hand, the Kai Junpa shocked the life out of Jong-won, leaving several burn marks on his body. Days later, they drove the couple's grandeur to a ravine, placed Jong-won's body in the driver's seat, and pushed the vehicle over the edge. When the mangled car was discovered the next day, investigators smelled the booze emanating off Jong-won's body and assumed that he had crashed while intoxicated. As for his girlfriend, Suk-young, she was kept as a prisoner in the group's hideout for their own personal amusement. On September 13th, the Kai Junpa captured yet another couple, So-yoon and his wife, Park Mia, whom they had found paying respects at a cemetery. Unlike their last targets though, Yuno did have some money. He was the president of the Samjang Machinery Company, but the business was a modest one which he had built from the ground up, and he was still repaying debts associated with his Factory S acquisition. Back at their hideout, The gang rigged Yuno's car with dynamite and sent him to collect a ransom of 100 million won, roughly $260,000. Unable to get his hands on that much cash, the businessman called one of his colleagues and told him to get 80 million ready by any means necessary, pretending he needed it for urgent medical treatment. When he went to pick it up, Yuno whispered to his colleague, I've been kidnapped. Don't follow me. That colleague immediately notified the police about the unfolding situation, but officers fumbled the response, bouncing the case between jurisdictions and not following up on the report. Yuno returned to the hideout with the ransom, expecting to exchange it for his wife's life. But the group had a manifesto to stick to. After handing her a powerful air rifle, the members forced their prisoner, Suk-young, to execute Yuno with a shot to the head. His wife, Park Mi-ya, was subsequently butchered with an axe. Their bodies were then dismembered and reportedly served at a neighborhood barbecue mixed with pork. The gang justified the cannibalism as a ritual to help renounce their humanity, and they forced Suk-young to consume the flesh of those that she had been made to kill. Now emboldened, the gang sought a more efficient way to target the wealthy. They purchased a VIP customer list from a former credit sales staffer at Hyundai, complete with full names and addresses. This became their hit list, but thankfully, their downfall came before they could start crossing off names. Over the 8 days that she had been locked in their dungeon, Suk-young had been working her job on one of the Kai Jumpa members, the cult's token incel, 22-year-old Hyeon-yang. You may recall the group's third rule, never trust a woman. Well, that had been suggested by Hyeon-yang himself. He had become resentful of all females when, after the loss of his father, his mother began dating his old man's best friend. Although a misogynist, psychologists say that he actually craved motherly love and projected that onto Suk-young. Despite being his prisoner, he always addressed Suk-young respectfully as Miss Lee, shared personal stories with her on multiple occasions, and had been the one to advocate for her life when his comrades wanted to slay her. Being a smart woman, Suk-young feigned Stockholm Syndrome, treating Hyeon-yang with kindness, biding her time, and waiting for an opportunity to escape. And that opportunity came on September 16th, 1994, when, during dynamite training, Hyeon-yang injured his hand. Suk-young consoled him and asked to accompany him to the hospital. There, something strange happened. Hyeon-yang gave Suk-young 500,000 won, around $700 in today's money, as well as a mobile phone. He then asked her, do you want to run away? Do you want to escape? Now is your chance. He also reminded her that she was technically an accessory to their crimes and, in the eyes of the law, was just as guilty as the rest of them. Whether this was a way to mock her or a genuine act of mercy is debatable, though experts seem to believe this was merely a test, that Hyeon-yang truly believed his new mummy had been successfully indoctrinated. What he was too stupid to understand, though, was that Suk-young was far more mentally strong than the whole of the Kai Jumpa combined. While Hyeon-yang was being treated, Suk-young fled the hospital, took a taxi, and escaped. But freedom didn't come easy. Suk-young told the driver to step on it, saying that she was being chased by gangsters. Bizarrely, the driver casually mentioned that he knew all the local thugs, a statement which terrified Suk-young. She, of course, feared that he may be part of the Kai Jumpa. As such, she asked to be dropped off at a nearby vineyard. Using the phone that she had been given, she tried to contact the police, but was repeatedly brushed off, with multiple officers telling her that she wasn't in their jurisdiction and should call someone else. Suk-young persuaded the vineyard owner to let her rent a car and drove all the way to Daejeon, worried that the gang would follow her to Daejeon. She then switched to a taxi and traveled to Seoul, where she went directly to the Sicho police station and reported everything. Initially, officers dismissed her story, believing her to be a babbling drug addict. But when Suk-young mentioned how her lover had been taser-ed, one senior detective recalled the suspicious burn marks that they had found on Jong-won's body, and at long last, the authorities mobilized. On September 17th, the gang recruited Lee Jang-soo, Dong-eun's girlfriend, to fill the empty spot in their ranks and fulfill the cooking and cleaning duties. Bad timing for her, as by September 19th, she and the rest of the Kai Jumpa were arrested. Lucky timing for the cops, as Hyeon-yang, who had just disgraced himself by letting Suk-young escape, was preparing to blow himself apart with stacks of dynamite. The raid on their hideout uncovered their full arsenal of weapons, as well as the cooked remains of their victims within the body incinerator. Each member of the group was charged with 5 counts of murder. Since investigators barely spent a week looking into the case after the arrests, it's entirely possible that there were more victims we still don't know about. As you can imagine, a media circus ensued, with the newspapers referring to the group as South Korea's Manson family. The gang members themselves showed no remorse, telling the media that society was to blame for their rampage. One claimed that he wished he had butchered more. Another bragged about enjoying the taste of human flesh. Prior to their trial, the IQ scores of the Kai John-po were revealed. All of them scored in the low 92nds, with the exception of leader Kim Ji-hwan, who scored over 100. Though far from a genius, some speculate that Ji-hwan exploited his slightly higher intelligence to manipulate the others. In fact, some prison inmates and guards later remarked that, except for Ji-hwan, the rest of the crew were shockingly naive and simple-minded. Their lack of gray matter did little to elicit public sympathy. But more than the actions of the Kai John-po, South Koreans were outraged by how passive law enforcement had been in handling the situation. This sparked widespread backlash, leading the government to make an example out of the gangsters. After a speedy trial which concluded on October 31st, all the male members of the Kai John-po were found guilty and sentenced to death. Only the female member, Lee Young-suk, was spared as she hadn't personally taken part in any of the slayings. She was given a 3-year sentence, 1 year for every day she had been a member of the Kai John-po. The others were hanged on November 2nd, 1995. Thankfully, prosecutors didn't indict Suk-young, recognizing that her involvement was under coercion. To keep her out of the public eye, she was provided with a home and employment in the countryside. Unfortunately, the media tracked her down and hounded her for interviews for years thereafter, with journalists desperate to ask her disgusting questions like, "What does human meat taste like?" She would later criticize the near-total lack of meaningful aftercare for crime victims in South Korea. In 2020, it was reported that Suk-young was battling late-stage cancer. Contrary to online speculation, a 2024 broadcast confirmed that she was still alive, had converted to Catholicism, and was still working on finding peace. Even with all the core members of the Kai John-po now gone, the memory of their actions still lingers. The town of Yanggwang, where the lair once stood, carries a deep shame, and though the Pink House has since been demolished, the horror committed there isn't so easily erased. For years, South Korea debated whether these monsters were made rather than born, and a lot of blame was cast on violent media. Horror movies were censored, and FPS video games were banned from release altogether. Near the end of the 92nds, it was broadly accepted that the censorship had gone too far and that the group's madness was rooted in something darker than pixelated gore. As has become clear, the Kai John-po were rebels with a cause, but without any conviction. They wanted to devour the rich, but all they ever consumed were innocent lives and their own humanity. And 3 decades on, the nation is still digesting what that says about the society which made them. Rachel Morningstar Hoffman was a 23-year-old psychology grad from Tallahassee with a bright future. Smart, bubbly, and known for her fun-loving spirit, she was voted party animal of her senior class in high school. That reputation followed her to Florida State University, where she regularly indulged in the devil's lettuce, something that in today's world might get you a slap on the wrist or no punishment at all, depending on where you live. But this was early 2000s Florida, and the law wasn't so forgiving. In spite of her recreational habits, Rachel thrived at college. She earned her bachelor's degree in psychology in 2007 and had plans to attend culinary school the following semester, not as a fallback, mind you, but as part of an ambitious new idea to pioneer a form of therapy built around cooking and communal eating. She believed that therapy didn't have to happen in a stuffy office. It could happen over a cutting board, a stovetop, a shared meal. That vision, however, would never come to pass. In April 2008, Rachel was busted for possessing several ounces of Mary Jane and 6 tablets of E. She refused to name her supplier, but instead of letting the charge run its course, police saw an opportunity. Specifically, Tallahassee police officer Ryan Pender took note of Rachel's clean-cut image, her lack of criminal history, and her deep fear of jail time, and decided that she would make the perfect pawn. And so, Pender presented her with a deal: face felony charges and possible prison time, or go undercover in a sting operation to bust some actual hardened criminals. Rachel felt trapped. Her future was on the line, after all, and so she agreed. The briefing was shortened to the point. Rachel's targets were to convicted felons and dealers: Danilo Green and his brother-in-law, and Rios Bradshaw. Her mission: meet with them at Bradshaw's house while wearing a wire, buy 1,500 pills of 2 ounces of cocaine, and a semi-auto handgun in exchange for $13,000 in marked bills, and return to police headquarters. Rachel had never handled a gun, never bought hard substances in her life, and had zero training in undercover work. And yet she had just been assigned to the largest sting in the department's history. Pender reassured her that the operation would go smoothly, that 19 officers would be watching, and that she was totally safe. She wasn't. On the evening of May 7th, police wired Rachel's blouse and sent her off alone to meet the dealers. Dressed in blue jeans, a Grateful Dead t-shirt, and black flip-flops, she hopped in her silver Volvo and set off towards Bradshaw's. But almost immediately, things went sideways. While en route, Green and Bradshaw called Rachel and changed the meeting location to Forest Meadows, a nearby park. Rachel, assuming the police were still tracking her, went along with the change, but the area was dense with trees, and the chopper following her overhead lost sight of her. Other officers later admitted that they had assumed someone still had eyes on Rachel, so nobody scrambled to find her husband. And Rachel, still believing that she was being watched, was told to continue with the operation. After a second change in location, Rachel drove towards a nearby plant nursery, about 1.5 miles north of the park. Minutes later, her wire malfunctioned. According to Officer Pender, Hoffman eventually reached him at just before 7:00 p.m. and said, "I followed them from the nursery. We're on guard. It's a dead-end street." He claims to have told her, "Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. Do not follow them." But the line went dark. Either Rachel hung up, said Pender, or the signal was lost. That's despite the fact that, at that same time, Rachel managed to send one final text to her concerned boyfriend: "It's about to go down." By the time officers located and arrived on Gardner Road, Rachel and her car were long gone. In their place was spent .25 caliber casing, to live rounds, and a single black flip-flop. Hours passed with no word from Rachel. The police floated the idea that maybe she had vanished with the money. Later that day, they went to her boyfriend's house expecting to find her there, but she wasn't. 2 days after Rachel vanished, a body was discovered in a vine-choked ravine near Perry, Florida, a quiet town about 50 miles southeast of Tallahassee. It belonged to confidential informant No. 112, Aka Rachel Hoffman, wrapped up in her own shirt and the bright orange and purple sleeping bag on. She had been shot 5 times in the chest and head with the very gun that the police had sent her to purchase. After the exchange went south, Green and Bradshaw forced her into a stolen BMW, executed her in transit, and tossed her like garbage. Both men were later arrested and admitted to killing Rachel after finding the wire in her purse. They suspected something shady was going on from the start. After being found out, Rachel cried into the wire for help, but her screams went unheard. On what would have been Rachel's 25th birthday, and Rios Bradshaw was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole, plus 30 additional years. Danilo Green pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and received the same. The grand jury also took the rare step of publicly rebuking the inept Tallahassee Police Department. Tallahassee PD, meanwhile, went into damage control. Police Chief Dennis Jones even went on ABC News and painted Rachel as a lowlife. "Yes," he said, "I'm calling her a criminal. Rachel Hoffman was committing crimes in the city of Tallahassee. Yes, she was. That's my job as a police chief, is to find these criminals in our community and to take them off the street to make the proper arrest." That's in spite of her having never been charged with a crime or having had her day in court. He also went on to blame her for her own murder, stating that she deviated from the original plan by meeting the targets on Gardner Road. The plan that we had in place was deviated from. It was uns. It was a change of plans and unfortunately, Rachel decided to deviate from that plan, not meet at the predetermined location. If she's going off the plan and she's deviating, or she's nervous, or she's making mistakes. She's a 23-year-old recent college graduate. Yeah, why didn't your officers move in right then and there and shut the whole thing down? That would have been ideal. Why didn't you do it? Ryan, again, the ideal situation. This is my question. Why didn't that happen? Have you asked that simple question? I haven't asked that question because that's what we're finding out in the investigation. Why wouldn't you ask that question? Isn't that the whole point here? When I'm given a chance to ask that question, I will ask that question. How long has it been since she died? How long has it been? May the 7th. Rachel's friends and family didn't let that stand. They fought back hard. They reminded the public that Rachel had no relationship with the suspects, no knowledge of firearms, and no training for what she had been asked to do. They forced the department to admit that she had been catastrophically unprepared, entirely unprotected, and that they had broken guidelines by blackmailing her husband. Eventually, several officers involved were suspended with pay, and Officer Pender was fired, only to be rehired shortly thereafter. Many question whether he really told Rachel to abandon the mission, only for the wire to go dark, or whether he and his cronies only said that to cover their tracks. Rachel's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city, eventually winning a $6 million settlement and a formal apology from the 19 officers involved, which up to that point, they hadn't felt the need to give of. But their biggest victory came in 2009, when Rachel's law was signed into Florida state legislation. The law established strict protocols for recruiting and using confidential informants. It requires the police to assess an informant's risk, give them access to legal counsel, and most importantly, actually protect them. Rachel's parents didn't just grieve. They took the worst moment of their lives and used it to stop other families from living the same nightmare. But nothing can undo what happened. Rachel's death was a preventable failure. A young woman was coerced into a dangerous job she had no business doing, all because it was convenient for the police to use her. And then they failed her in every conceivable way. Grand Prairie, Texas, a densely suburban and diverse city of about 200,000 people nestled evenly between Fort Worth and Dallas, with a violent crime rate 45% lower than the national average. When it comes to settling down, it's considered one of the safer built-up areas in the Lone Star State. One man who fell on the wrong side of that statistic was Hop Van Nguyen, a single, 32-year-old Vietnamese American who lived alone on the 2400 block of Lancaster Drive. Described by those who knew him as a guy who lived in the moment, Hop was a fan of travel, fishing, fitness, and winter sports. Little else about his personal life has been revealed to the public. In the summer of 2017, Hop suddenly stopped responding to calls and messages from family and friends. Unable to reach him, his concerned loved ones contacted Grand Prairie PD and reported him missing. An investigation was quickly launched. Law enforcement asked local residents to be on the lookout for a 5'7" Asian male with short black hair, brown eyes, a scar behind his right ear, a half-sleeve dragon tattoo on his right arm, and a tattoo on his right inner arm with the letters TFT. They also noted that he was missing the tip of his right index finger. According to NEMAS, Hop was last seen at about 10:30 p.m. on Thursday, August 17th, driving his white Nissan 350's E-convertible on State Highway 161. Just as he exited the lower Torrent Road, his car was found abandoned and empty thereafter. Grand Prairie PD haven't shared exactly when or where it was discovered. In fact, the only clue they have released is a short video clip, one recorded by Hop's very own Ring doorbell camera. It was captured the same night he was last seen and features a person of interest, or POI, whom law enforcement believe played a role in Hop's disappearance. As you can see, the Ring camera detects movement and activates. An unidentified subject is seen backing up towards Hop's door and covers the camera with a sheet of paper or a post-it note. The figure then sets about gaining access to the residence. We can hear the sound of rustling as he fusses with the door, though some people believe this noise is the POI inserting a key into the lock. Others have pointed out that it could be the sound of a lock-picking rig. after the initial sound of the pins, which sounded like a key being inserted. You don't hear the cylinder turn or the lock click. You just hear more pins being manipulated. Then, after 5 seconds or so, he gets the locks and the door opens. After finishing with the lock, a faint beep can be heard. The door opens with a creak, and we hear the intruder speak with someone. It's not clear whether Hop was home at the time or who the PO I was addressing. Following this exchange, someone steps outside and fiddles with the camera. Just before the video cuts to black, a digital chime or screech can be heard. Did you catch that? There, right at the very end, another separate sound can just about be made out. Focus on that very last sound. This is the Roger beep, a tone often added automatically to the end of radio transmissions to indicate that the operator has finished speaking. Chillingly, it's identical to the sound heard in the Ring footage. That strongly suggests that the PO I was communicating with an accomplice over a two-way radio, and not calmly chatting with Hop inside. Rewinding a bit, another beep or screech can be heard just before the PO I opens Hop's front door. Some believe this to be the sound of a keypad, but going through Lancaster Drive on Google Street View, all of the homes appear to be modest, single-story buildings with conventional doors. As such, I believe that sound was more likely from a communication device brought by the intruder. In my opinion, this was a well-planned, well-orchestrated invasion of Hop's home. The PO I knew about his Ring doorbell camera and came prepared with a paper covering. He approached the door with the confidence of a professional. He knew to use a radio device, so he couldn't be GPS tracked, and he almost certainly wasn't working alone. As you can see, this video lacks a timestamp, and the authorities haven't confirmed whether it was captured before or after Hop was last seen. It's worth reminding everyone that Ring doorbell cameras are motion activated, and no footage of Hop returning home has been mentioned in any press releases. Based on that and how confidently the POA acts, as if he wasn't expecting any resistance, if I had to make a judgment call, I'd say that the clip was filmed at some point after 10:30 p.m., and that Hop didn't make it home on August 17th. With that said, it's best to keep an open mind as we explore this case in more detail. As mentioned, Hop was last seen at 10:30 p.m. exiting Lower Tart, a thin stretch of road approximately a 10-minute drive from his home. Again, the authorities haven't told us why he was there in the first place, whether he was meeting a friend there or attending an event, for example. So, let's get on Google Street View and take a look around. Near the entrance, we have some greenery, lots of trees, and a small field. A little further, we have an unusual house with statues of zoo animals in the yard. This small house here seems to be abandoned. As we go a little further, we reach the Grand Prairie Gun Club, a gated shooting range. The road continues a little further and leads to an obstacle course in the dead end. Here we have a third house, and beyond that is Johnson Creek. In all, it's about a half-mile of fields, woodland, and shooting lawns. Seems like an odd place for Hop to have found himself late on a weeknight. So why was he last seen exiting Lower Torrent that night? Was he there visiting one of the, frankly, odd houses? Had he gone to the shooting range, which is closed on Thursdays and never open after 6:00 p.m.? Was he doing a spot of late night fishing in the creek or nearby river? Had he taken a wrong turn so close to home? Or was he meeting someone in a secluded area for some unknown reason? The next question I have is, where did Hop go missing? For reasons already covered, I think on the balance of probability, Hop didn't make it home that night. We know his vehicle left Lower Tarn Road, but did he head straight in the direction of his home, or did he drive elsewhere to meet someone? Moreover, how confident are the police that Hop was the person behind the wheel of his vehicle as it left Lower Tarn Road? Is it possible that he went missing in this confined area somewhere, and then someone else drove his car out onto State Highway 161? Just food for thought. Naturally, we also need to ask why. Why target Hop Van Nguyen of all people? Well, looking through Hop's now inactive Facebook page, it's clear he appreciated the finer things in life, particularly expensive cars and watches. As such, I've seen a few people suggest that he may have been targeted for his wealth, or at least for his perceived wealth. But I have to stress that Hop lived in a modest house on Lancaster Drive, whose residents are predominantly low income. In fact, The neighborhood is one of the most poverty-stricken in the entire US, with an income lower than 94.8% of the country. Though the police haven't confirmed what Hop did for work or how much he earned, I think it's safe to say that although he fantasized about luxury purchases, he wasn't actually a rich guy himself. As far as I can tell, no material items were reported stolen from the property either. That leaves us with two possibilities: that Hop was home when this footage was captured in the PO I came to target him, or the PO I had already dispatched if Hop and went there to get something specific, something that even Hop's family and maybe even the authorities don't know about. What that item could be is the subject of much speculation. My final question then is who? It's clear that Hop wasn't randomly targeted and that someone out there had a reason to make him disappear. This figure, to be precise. But who are they? Based on their physique and clothes, they appear to be a young male. You can make out the outline of his nose in the still frame, and from another angle, when he presses himself up into the corner of the entrance, it looks like his dark jacket is zipped up over his mouth. The subject also wore dark trousers, a white and black baseball cap, and possibly white gloves. Aside from that, it's hard to build much of a profile from this footage. The PO did a good job of concealing his face. With so little information to work with, some have questioned whether this could have been a gang hit. Proponents of that idea have latched onto Hop's DFD tattoo and his missing fingertip, questioning whether he was affiliated in some way with a Vietnamese syndicate, be that as a former member or someone who owed them a debt. Though I want to stress, that's all speculative. For all we know, the letters TFT were the initials of a loved one, and his fingertip could have easily been lost in an accident. All that's to say, this figure's motive remains shrouded in mystery. Despite releasing this video to the public, law enforcement received little in the way of new leads. They continue to seek information that could bring closure to the Nguyen family, who all believe that Hop was either abducted or otherwise met with foul play. Hop Van Nguyen hasn't been seen or heard from since August 17, 2017. If still alive, he'd be 39 years old today. If you have any information pertaining to his whereabouts, or if you recognize the person of interest in this footage, please contact the GPPD immediately. You can even do so anonymously. All the information you need is on screen now. This was Christina Yuna Lee, a 35-year-old Korean American originally from New Jersey, a creative producer by trade who had worked on campaigns for the likes of Google, Twix, and Equinox. Christina relocated to New York in 2021 to work for the online music platform Splice. There, she rented an apartment in the 111 Christie Street building, a 23-unit complex situated in the Big Apple's Chinatown district. In the early hours of February 13th, 2022, Christina caught a cab back to her apartment after a night on the town. She was dropped off right in front of the main entrance. What happened next was caught on the building's internal surveillance cameras. This chilling footage shows Christina in her final moments. As can be seen, she enters the complex at 4:00 a.m. An unknown male grabbed the door just before it closed and stalked Christina up 6 flights of stairs, staying 1 floor behind her all the way. There's no indication she noticed him following her. Christina opened her front door and stepped into her apartment, and the man forced his way inside with her, sealing the poor girl's fate. Minutes later, 2 other residents were awoken by the sound of high-pitched screams coming from Christina's apartment. "Help me," cried the voice. "Somebody call 911. The neighbors did just that, and officers arrived within 3 minutes. They rushed upstairs and could still hear Miss Lee's desperate cries from the other side of the wall, but frustratingly, they couldn't break down the reinforced door. The intruder had barricaded it. As they negotiated with the man inside, the screams coming from within the apartment slowly melted away and were replaced by a disturbing silence. A silence broken by a shrill voice from inside. "We don't need the police, sir. Go away." The voice was clearly that of a male imitating a female. Following this, the intruder attempted to escape the apartment via the fire escape, but scurried back inside when he noticed officers on the roof above him. A tactical team arrived 80 minutes later and finally managed to force an entry. Inside, they found Christina in her bathtub, completely unresponsive and disrobed from the waist up. She was pronounced dead at 5:00 a.m. her killer was discovered hiding under her bed. He was immediately taken into custody and identified as 25-year-old Samad Nash, a homeless man who had never met his victim. And yet, in the brief window between Christina exiting her taxi and entering her apartment building, Nash had noticed her and made the split-second decision to butcher her. And butcher her he most certainly did. She had been stabbed more than 40 times with a yellow-handled blade, which Nash had taken from her kitchen. There was so much blood, said the owner of Christina's apartment building, Brian Chin. My wife said I should call someone to clean it all up, but I'm gonna do it myself. It's the least I can do for that poor girl. Brian knew Christina well. They had both been undergraduates at Rutgers and would often talk about their university days together. He described her as a wonderful human being whose smile lit up the room. In honor of her memory, he set up a modest altar outside her apartment door, an orange set upon a metal stool. A memorial made of candles and flowers was also set up outside the building, one which was vandalized several times by, frankly, sick weirdos. The perpetrator, Nash, was a so-called transit swiper who let people through the subway turnstiles for a fee. A career criminal, he'd been arrested at least 7 times since 2015 and was out on supervised release for 3 open cases when he took Christina's life, including for an unprovoked assault. He's also said to have an extensive record in New Jersey and had admitted to selling and using dust and K2, synthetic substances known to cause unpredictable behavior. He was under their influence when he first saw Christina. At the station, Nash denied taking Christina's life and claimed he was trying to help her. He believed that since he was only caught on camera following his victim, he couldn't actually be charged with her death. She called me, Nash told them. She was having a party and she invited me over for a drink. During his interview, he repeatedly yawned and laughed, making light of the situation. Since then, Nash has pleaded guilty to ending Miss Lee's life. His sentencing is scheduled for the 30th of this month, and according to the DA's office, he's expected to receive 30 years to life. Christina did nothing wrong, said the president of the Betrayal Association. Just anew. The only mistake she made was to move to New York City. Our city allowed her life to be taken away. Crime has no consequence here. Unfortunately, incidents like this are far from unheard of. I'm reminded of the silent stalker case, which I mentioned in my Lee on overview. The potential victim was extremely fortunate. Heard or automatically locked just before an opportunistic stranger could force his way inside. Sadly, Christina wasn't so lucky. So, to all of my audience, please stay vigilant when moving through transitional spaces, even in the perceived safety of your own apartment buildings. This final entry takes us just over the Canadian border into tranquil Halton Hills, a small, vibrant town about 45 km outside of Toronto, Ontario, renowned for its picturesque downtown, green spaces, and overall livability, with plenty of art galleries, some of the best regional shops and restaurants in the country, and an extremely low crime rate. The primary population center of Georgetown is a magnet for wealthier folks looking for a peaceful life away from the bustle of the big city. And yet, homeowners on one of the community's sleep-by-est residential streets were awoken in the early hours of February 17th, 2021, by an ear-shattering sound, an explosion that occurred at 76 Hidden Lake Trail. Firefighters arrived to fight the blaze, and while doing so, they made a grim discovery. In the garage were the smoldering remains of the homeowners, 56-year-old Christina Ray Rack and 59-year-old Andre Ray Rackand. A well-liked, hard-working couple. Christina was the vice president of operations at Rogue Transportation, and Andre was a manager at the Boiler Inspection and Insurance Company of Canada. They had both been making retirement plans and were preparing for the next chapter of their lives together, a chapter they would never get to enjoy. While inspecting the charred ruins of the home, the Ontario Fire Marshal quickly realized that the explosion hadn't occurred accidentally, as everyone assumed. Someone had intentionally set the house ablaze. Prompted by the UEUFM's findings, the coroner conducted their own investigation and determined that Christina and Andre had both been killed before the fire began. On February 19th, Halton Regional Police's Homicide Squad took over the case and, shortly thereafter, released images of a vehicle of interest, once seen fleeing the scene in the early hours. The authorities also appealed to local residents, asking them to come forward with any dashcam or surveillance footage captured along Hidden Lake Trail. The homeowners opposite the Ray Racks just so happened to have a security camera on the front of their property, and when they heard about that appeal, they decided to examine the footage. In the video, which was captured the evening before the fire, Christina is seen pulling into her garage at 6:24 p.m. A shadowy figure emerges from the darkness and crouches beside her. Christina exits the vehicle, oblivious to the intruder watching her. The garage door closes, trapping the Ray Racks inside their own home with their soon-to-be killer. Neither Christina nor her husband were ever seen alive again. The camera didn't pick up anything else suspicious until 5:00 when the garage suddenly exploded. It wouldn't be until March 26, 2021, that they finally tracked down the man in this footage, 27-year-old Harrison Brown, a man with no prior record. Brown was an employee of Rogue Transportation, the company where Christina worked as vice president of operations. In the weeks leading up to the slayings, Brown had allegedly got into several conflicts at work, and Christina had instructed him to work from home. Her reprimand is cited as the catalyst for Brown's murderous rage. Brown began tracking Christina's movements using a GPS device, which he covertly placed on her vehicle. As such, he knew exactly when she had arrived at her 76 Hidden Lake Trail home. On February 16th, Brown was there waiting as early as 4:36 p.m. that afternoon and was ready to strike at 6:24 p.m. when she pulled into the garage. He then snuck in behind her vehicle, and once the garage doors closed, confronted Christina and took her life using a blade. He then bludgeoned and killed Andre, who was already inside the home. Brown remained at the residence until 9:04 p.m. He then returned to his vehicle, which was parked a few streets away, and drove to his Mississauga home. Brown would return to the rear of the home in the early hours and cause an explosion. A broken knife covered in the Ray Rack's DNA was found in Brown's garage. Police also discovered the GPS software Brown had used to track Christina's vehicle on his laptop and phone, along with satellite images of the Ray Rack house. Additional evidence placed Brown's cell phone in the Hidden Lake Trail area at the time of the murders, and again when the fire was set. In the face of mounting evidence, Brown pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. Justice Clayton Conlon took that as proof of Brown's remorse, but also acknowledged that his actions were horrific and pre-planned. On December 1st, 2023, the judge sentenced him to life in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 25 years.